And so there's a generosity component to say, hey, this is not just about wealth building. The value of having a business is that you have influence over people's lives. To be a good steward of that as well, I think is really powerful.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 230. Ellis Hammond is my guest today, and he began investing in real estate while he was serving as a college pastor in San Diego. While his goal was to create passive cash flow for his family, he realized that investing in real estate could be an incredible resource to help his family and many others achieve financial freedom. He and his wife invested in a San Diego duplex in 2018, and 9 months later, he became a co-general partner on a 144-unit apartment complex in Memphis, Tennessee. Ellis is also the founder of Kingdom Capitalists, the #1 mastermind community for Christian real estate entrepreneurs. He hosts a top-rated podcast called Kingdom Capitalists, where he features other successful Christian entrepreneurs and business owners. Ellis, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, what a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I'd love if you could just kind of fill us in on your background, where you come from and how you got started investing in real estate.
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell from my bio that you read, it definitely was, I knew nothing about real estate when we began. I guess if you come from a real estate family, you might know that. But I find that a lot of folks, get into real estate because they're looking for a better way to build wealth, something that they can understand, right? And they find that real estate is a great vehicle to be able to do that. And that was really the same story for me. I was a Christian pastor out here in San Diego, and we directed a nonprofit, and our ministry was growing. And honestly, man, we were hungry to find more ways to create passive income. We were raising all the funds that we needed to support our ministry at that time. And I just knew I wanted to figure out better ways to create wealth and create income. And I'll make a long story short here is I remember driving in my car one day and I heard a radio ad and it said, hey, if you want to learn how to build wealth through real estate, come to this 2-hour conference or the seminar. And it just hit me at the right time. And I was like, that's me. I don't know how to build wealth yet. And I'm sure I'm hungry to do it. And I showed up to this 2-hour seminar, and it was the first time, Ryan, that I realized if, it wasn't a room of super high net worth people or people that came from really rich families. You could tell it was very much a blue collar room. But I just began to hear stories of guys and girls who were building significant wealth through the vehicle of real estate. And, it's kind of one of those things like, hey, if they can do it, I think I could probably be able to figure this thing out too. And so that was kind of the start of us getting into real estate. And,
whose seminar was that?
I believe it was a Than Merrill seminar, and they were trying, it's one of those things where you kind of pay, you go for free, but then they try and get you to keep paying. But it was the 2 hours I took enough out of, and that was what I needed to get me going.
A lot of times people go to the 2-hour free seminar and then go on to the paid boot camps and coaching. What was your path from there?
It was a big investment. So we didn't do it. I also was I kind of wanted to see what else was out there. And I'm thankful that I did that. And I just was hungry, man. So I just, the first avenue for me was podcast. And what I heard, probably the best advice I ever got as an early real estate investor was go find a mentor. And start telling people what you want to do. And so as I was listening to more content, what I realized, hey, we want to buy something with more than one unit. It was from the very beginning, it was don't buy just one unit, buy multiple units. And so, man, I just was telling everybody, I want to buy a multifamily apartment complex. And I found a mentor here in San Diego. I got introduced to a guy who owned several apartments here in San Diego. And he actually was kind of the guy who helped me find a deal. Our first deal was a duplex here in San Diego, California, because I didn't know anything about raising private money yet. I didn't know that you could bring in other people and use their money for real estate. I just knew hey, we have X amount of money. We probably have one family investor who also could throw some money at us, and we're going to go find a duplex. And thankfully, we got started on a good foot.
Talk about that, because there's several steps you took there. One was you listened to a bunch of podcasts. and you kind of distilled that information down into a goal, which was buy multifamily. Then you went out and found a mentor. Let's focus on that for a moment. How did you find this mentor?
You have to be evangelistic about your cause, like whatever your cause is. My cause at that time was we are going to figure out a better way to create wealth, and we are going to create some passive income. And so, I mean, it didn't matter where we were, who I was talking to. It was like, what are you doing? Or how are you doing? I'm fine. I'm looking to buy a multifamily, duplex or triplex. You know anybody? It was just like I was evangelistic. I want to get into real estate. And it was actually the landlord of a guy that I worked with became kind of that first mentor for me. And man, I just for whoever's listening, it doesn't really matter where you are in your journey. If you're just getting started or you're well into your journey, I have just found like finding a mentor and finding a community to plug into is the fastest way to accelerate your goals. And that was so true for me because I didn't know what I was looking at. And he actually was the guy who helped. He got on the MLS. He actually found a deal that looked like something worthy of investment here in San Diego. Now, we had to make the final decision and pull the trigger. But without him, man, it would have taken a lot longer.
So you said something about being evangelistic. Does that basically mean tell everybody what you're looking for and what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the typical, evangelist in like the religious sense, they're out there on the street corner. That's kind of the picture we have of them shouting and telling everybody about God. And I just think it's the same way when it comes to your goals. Like if you're passionate about something, you're trying to achieve something. I mean, it's the same reason the evangelist is on the street corners because he has something that he thinks the world should know about. And it was the same thing for me. It's like this is what we're passionate about accomplishing. Is to gain more financial independence for us and for others. And so, yeah, I literally we were telling everybody.
Buying a duplex in San Diego. I can't imagine that you were able to find a duplex in San Diego that would cash flow. Talk about what you found and what the numbers look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. You could probably buy a small apartment, apartment community for what you have to pay for per unit here in San Diego. So it was really expensive. It was $570,000 for 2 units here in San Diego, California. And Brian, some of your listeners are like, oh my gosh, that's insane. But if you're from San Diego, you're thinking, man, that's a good deal.
Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't sound too bad. Where was this in San Diego?
Yeah, so it was a little neighborhood. If you're familiar or listening to this area, kind of central San Diego, in a kind of a residential neighborhood called Talmadge, and it actually really was a good deal. It was 2 separate units, kind of detached units. It was considered a duplex. One of those situations where it was one of the ugliest houses in one of the best neighborhoods. We just happened to get on the right time, and we did traditional financing. And, about 2 days after we had signed the contract, the seller had gotten an all cash offer for about $5,000 over our property. And so we knew, kind of right away, like, okay, well, we can't screw this up too bad because we got people willing to pay cash for what we just, financed. And, about 11 months later, we put in probably around $40,000 in rehab, and that property appraised for over $740,000. And so we refinanced that property to pull out some equity and actually give some of that money back to our family investor who had helped us purchase this deal. And it's been a great unit for us. We actually short-term rental. We do Airbnb in the property, and that has helped us really create a really nice kind of cash flowing stream off this duplex. So it was a great investment.
Let's talk about that, because I can't imagine that if you were renting it out as a straight up rental, that you'd ever make enough in rent income to actually cash flow.
Well, you have to also realize, a 2-bedroom here in San Diego is also $2,500 to rent, right? So even though your property costs are a lot more, your rent is probably double than most of the markets that your listeners are in. And so, that's also the big difference here.
But by doing the vacation rental strategy, you can really exponentially increase your income.
So now it's at, if you say $2,500 a unit, if you're doing Airbnb, now we're talking anywhere from $3,500 to $4,500 a unit. Now that's just straight gross. Of course, you got to there's a little bit more expenses with the Airbnb, but for sure add $1,000 a month to each unit.
Nice. So you did the duplex and you turned it into a vacation rental, which sounds like it's working out well for you. Where did you go next?
Yeah. So even though it was great, like we loved, it was our start, right? And I think everybody loves their first property because it got them into it. And that's the case for me. It's very sentimental. We love the process. I learned like, oh, wow, like we can continue to do this. But what I also learned in that process was I don't want to do all the work. Like when you buy small properties, you're typically having to do all of the work. You're kind of the GC, the general contractor, even if you have a general contractor. And, it was many late nights of cleaning floors and landscaping. And I just learned really quickly that, I really want to build wealth through real estate, but there's got to be a better way. And my passion, or I would even say my gifting, is really in kind of the networking space. I'm really good at building relationships. The evangelist in me, from being a pastor, is really good at just talking with people and building communities. And I wanted to figure out how to really leverage that more. And that's when I learned about the world of syndication, where we could actually essentially raise capital from others. So we didn't need our own money. We could raise capital from private investors, and then we could partner with other folks or other experts in this space who essentially had the team already established, third party property management, the asset manager in place. And essentially we could partner together with them. And so, you read in my bio, in 9 months, that took me about 9 months to realize, we did 144 units. It was almost a $10 million deal. And we leveraged our network, was really how we got into that deal. We had a network of investors that, that really trusted us from raising funds for this ministry for a long time. And essentially I just went to them and said, hey, like, we're passionate about building wealth through real estate. We think this is a great vehicle. Here's why. And we brought it to a few people. I mean, we brought it to a lot of people, and a few people said yes. And that was kind of our start.
So that's a pretty big about face to go from a duplex to all of a sudden you're raising a large amount of money from multiple investors for an apartment complex. How did you learn how to do that?
I mentor, right? Like it all goes back to like, okay, who's doing this? How are they doing this? And I found some, I would say he probably actually found me. And he was kind of the guy who taught me about or introduced me to the world of syndication. And he was kind of playing a similar role that I wanted to play, was kind of this raising money role. But, for your audience, Ryan, there's a ton of folks out there. I mean, one of my mentors now, Hunter Thompson, he has a book called Raising Capital for Real Estate. And, that's how, because it's one of those things, like you have to learn the language, right? Real estate is a language in a sense. And so it's just, again, immersing myself in something new, immersing myself with podcasts and books, kind of learning the language and understanding how this works, so that when I went to investors, I had the confidence to, I was in the ministry world. So in some ways I had to convince them, like, no, I also know a thing about real estate now, because I've been studying this like I'm in college all over again. And so, it was definitely finding a mentor, but again, it was kind of immersing myself in this world of real estate, especially commercial real estate now. And, as you know this, because you've been doing this for 4 years now, it's amazing how much you can learn and pick up when you're just planted into the environment. It's like when I was in college, I was a Spanish major, and I spent 4 years studying the language. And then my last semester of college, I lived abroad in Spain. And I learned more in 6 months of how to speak Spanish than I did in 4 years, right? It's because I had planted myself in a culture that was speaking this language. And I think, that's exactly what I've done in the real estate world as well.
Yeah, there's no better way to learn than to actually do it. How much money were you able to raise for that apartment complex?
Yeah, it was a couple $100,000, about 4 or 5 investors we had on that deal. We've probably showed it to over 20 or 30 folks. And I think part of it was that comfort level, we don't really know. We don't really know exactly, what you're doing here. You don't have the experience. So we definitely had to get over that hurdle. But I think what I also learned in that process was, again, like it's kind of a foreign concept. This is hard for, I think, people who are in real estate to understand this, because we look at real estate and be like, oh, it's really simple. this is a great asset class to be invested in. But for those who have traditionally only invested in the stock market, to invest in something like real estate is a really big barrier. Like it takes some serious education for them to understand, taking money out of the stock market and actually placing it into a real asset like real estate. And so, that was when I learned, hey, I actually need to begin to build a brand and a platform to educate people on the benefits of owning real estate if we're really going to turn this into a business.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. What process did you go through to get people to want to invest with you? It sounds like education was what you had to do.
Yeah, exactly. It was going on podcasts like this and kind of sharing my story was really one. Yeah, and honestly, it's just sitting down with people and getting on the phone. And, I have a website now, ellishammond.com, that has a couple articles. But probably the biggest way for me was LinkedIn. I found that LinkedIn was a great platform that I could begin to create content. I could be able to post things, videos, articles, short, posts to just help people. And it was kind of a no pressure way, but I knew people were seeing me. To begin to show them, like, first of all, I am also a real estate investor and not just a pastor, because I'm building this brand here on LinkedIn. And it's one of those things like when people start commenting and liking your stuff, it kind of gives you that authority too. People are like, oh, wow, maybe Ellis does know what he's talking about. And so that was a great step for me, kind of making that transition. I'm actually no longer in the nonprofit world. I'm a full-time entrepreneur now. And that was a great way for me to build a brand and really build a network of investors who are ready to pull the trigger on large deals at this point.
Yeah, well, talk about LinkedIn, because I know a lot of people have talked about the power of using Facebook to get your message out and find investors and find opportunities. Why LinkedIn, not Facebook or some of the other social media platforms?
Imagine if you could go back 10 years and begin to build a brand on, think about this. Imagine if you could go back 10 years and invest in Amazon. Would you do it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Machine, sure.
And honestly, that's the same way with LinkedIn right now, in the sense that, like, to be able to grow a presence and a platform on LinkedIn is what Facebook was 10 years ago. To really grow traffic and to grow your brand on Facebook, now you really have to pay for it through ads and sponsorships, right? LinkedIn is such a young and organic platform that it is the time to begin to build a personal brand on that, because the organic reach, meaning like if I post something on LinkedIn, the amount of people that can see my post just through other people liking and commenting my stuff is absurd. Meaning I get about 5,000 views on pretty much every post that I put on LinkedIn right now. So it is an online billboard for my personal brand and also for my company, because I'm talking about my mastermind, I'm talking about my real estate investments. So, it's a 24/7 billboard that people are seeing every single day. And what's better than a billboard, though, is people can interact. So I'm building relationships with people. And so I never, honestly, Ryan, this is so huge, I never get on a phone call anymore. And this is the first time that we've met, right? And I think that's so huge, especially in for your real estate investing crowd, if they're raising capital for their deals. You never want to get on the phone and have to introduce yourself, right? Like when I get on the phone now, people feel like they already know me, even though we've never talked, because they've seen my content hundreds of times.
What is your process with LinkedIn as far as like the type of content you put out there and the goal of that content?
Let's make this really easy for those who are listening. There's I would say there's two ways to really do well on LinkedIn. You can either post your own content or you can engage with other people's content. You really need to be doing both. to really build a presence there, you need to be interacting. It is a organic platform right now. And the best way for your post to, I say this, Facebook rewards you for dollars, meaning the more dollars you put onto Facebook, they reward you for. LinkedIn rewards you for time right now. So the more time you put on LinkedIn, they're going to reward you for. Now that will shift and that will change. That's just their algorithm right now. And so if I was just, again, starting again on LinkedIn, I would have a good headshot. I would create a good bio that's personal, that speaks to my target audience and has a good call to action in my bio. Because remember, what you're trying to do is as you're building, this organic reach on LinkedIn, you're building an audience. People are going to click on your profile. And so in that profile, you want to have a good call to action. You want an engaging bio and then something for them to take an action on. And so that's in the bio. I'm never posting that in my content. That's what people got to realize. I'm not posting on LinkedIn, hey, invest with me because I just bought this 144 unit deal. No, I'm creating content that is very engaging, that's getting people to create discussion on this platform, so that they begin to get familiar with me and then they click on my bio. So you can create your own content, or the other easy way to do that is just engage with people in your industry. So in the search bar on LinkedIn, just type in a hashtag. Let's say you're in real estate, type in hashtag real estate investing and just begin to engage with the other leaders that are posting stuff on LinkedIn. And not only will they see you, but so will their audience. And if you're posting engaging stuff on their content, they're going to appreciate that. So that means when you post your stuff, they're probably going to engage back with you. But then also their audience is going to see your stuff and they might begin to interact with you. They might begin to click on your profile. So that really is my process. Start creating engaging content, but even more importantly, start engaging with other people's content, and you'll see a drastic increase in your LinkedIn presence.
We talk about the content though. Are you shooting videos? Are you writing articles? What type of content are you actually posting?
At this point, I kind of do it all. I think you figure out what you're good at. Remember, people don't like reading super long stuff. So if you're going to write an article, if you prefer not to be on video, then write an article and if you're going to write a long article, I always encourage people, take that article and make it 10 pieces of content. Meaning write a long article, post that on LinkedIn, but take quotes and put that on a photo and add that onto your news feed. If you're going to do a video, same thing. Let's say you have a big idea about you want to walk people through how to identify, a good income producing property in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Well, you could make that long form content and put that on YouTube, but then take 1 minute of that, cut it up and put it on LinkedIn. That way it'll be more engaging, and ask people, hey, what do you look for when you're looking at, income producing property, and ask them a question. That way you're creating that kind of community piece around LinkedIn. I find that to be really helpful.
Can you give us an example of a relationship you might have created using LinkedIn and what that has led to in real?
I create them all the time, man. So like the best story I can give you is I just went to the Best Ever conference, Joe Fairless. It's a large multifamily real estate investing conference last weekend. And I spent the entire time in the lobby connecting with people that I met on LinkedIn. And what's so interesting is that when I see these people, I don't shake their hand. I give them a hug, right? Like that's the type of camaraderie community that we have built on LinkedIn, is that when people see me or I see them, it's not like shaking their hand very formal. It's like, oh man, Marvin or Brian, like, how are you? Give me a hug. So good to see you. We're taking selfies together. And so like, that's the power of this platform is the brain doesn't really tell a difference between a screen and in person. The brain just says this, this is my friend. And so that is a great example. I have a lot of investors now who have come through LinkedIn. We have a lot of committed capital for our next project just through LinkedIn, because I post a lot of content for passive investors as well. And so, I can't quite put a number to it, but I for sure have investors that have come from LinkedIn as well.
To just get this straight, they find you on LinkedIn, engage with you on LinkedIn, but before they become an investor, I'd imagine you're having a phone conference with them or possibly meeting them in person.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, typically they, a good strategy, if they're engaging with my content or post something and they find it helpful, I might reach out to them on a direct, like a direct message and say, hey, thanks for, your comment on my post. Are you interested in learning more? Or, hey, would you like to have a conversation to discuss this further? Or they go to my bio and there's a link for my calendar and they can schedule a 15-minute call on my calendar. So that's another thing.
What calendar program are you using to do that?
I use Calendly. Yeah, it's great.
Calendly is great. If you're scheduling multiple meetings, especially like for the podcast, Calendly's been a lifesaver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're raising deals or if you're doing anything, Calendly is so great because you can create multiple calendars, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And when I was just getting started out, man, I would pick 2 days of the week and I would just book up my day with phone calls. And that was huge for growing my network. There's nothing better than getting on the phone with somebody and getting to know them personally. So for sure.
What length would those phone calls be?
Well, I started 30 minutes and then I realized a lot of that because I was just trying to get to know people. But as that got more and more and more, we got down to 15 minutes because, I just was trying to have more phone calls. So typically now if, with anybody, it's about 15 minutes.
And in that 15 minutes, how do you structure the call?
Even for my investors or even for our mastermind now, I mostly just want to get to know them. I mean, because the reality is for the most part, they probably know me. Like they see my content, they know what I'm about, they know my business. And even on that Calendly app, you can ask them, hey, what is the one thing what is the one thing you want to discuss on this phone call to make the most of our time? So that way I already know kind of what their expectation for the phone call is and what my expectation for the phone call is. So I spend a good bit of time just getting to know them. Because again, I've built that presence that they probably already know. I don't need to talk about me anymore. And then once I get to know them, then we can go to that one thing to say, hey, okay, you're interested in the mastermind, or hey, you're interested in investing in our next deal, or, whatever that might be. Or hey, you want to know more about LinkedIn. So that's how that call typically.
And what about Meetup Groups? I know that you're active with that as well.
Yeah. So we do a meetup group here in San Diego. It's called the Eggs and Cash Flow Breakfast. We meet at 7 a.m. twice a month here in San Diego, California. So if anybody's in San Diego, we're in Mission Valley at Mimi's Cafe. Please join us first and third Thursdays. But that's been a really fun way to also kind of build that community of like-minded folks. And they're active investors or passive investors. I found that to be, again, it all goes back to the same thing. It's putting yourself at the center of an ecosystem where people see you as the person of influence. And so LinkedIn, when I'm the content creator and people are engaging on my content, even if other people are adding different thoughts, it's my post. So I'm at the center of it. So I look like the authority. When I host a meetup here in San Diego, I'm typically not the one speaking. I bring other people in to educate our investors. But because I host the meetup, I'm the person of influence. I'm the center of it all. And so I most of the time, and maybe our speakers are also finding investors from the deal, but most of the time, I think after somebody comes and gives a really good presentation and there are investors in the room, they typically come to me and say, hey, Ellis, I'm not ready yet, but in 6 months, we're going to have a couple $100,000. We'd like to invest in real estate. It's I didn't even talk. I'm just at the center of this meetup group. And, so I just find that incredibly powerful. I think the key here is you want to, be at the center of the community any way possible. So for me, that's LinkedIn, that's our meetup group. And then more importantly, now it's going to be our mastermind.
What's a successful structure then for a successful meetup group?
Yeah, I try and keep it really simple just because we're busy and I don't want to have to do all the setup. So we do it at a restaurant. We do it at a breakfast restaurant. We have our own private room. So they set up the room for us and we just walk in, they serve us coffee. And so we do 15 to 20 minutes of kind of light networking, just to allow people to show up, drink some coffee. It's 7 a.m., right? So people got to get some caffeine in them first. And then we sit down and order breakfast, but we still keep that networking going for about 10 to 15 minutes till about 7:30, 7:35. And then we have about a 30-minute presentation. And we're focused on commercial real estate. So that's kind of our niche. And I would say that's really helpful, is to find a niche that you're going to serve. There's a ton of real estate meetups in San Diego, but we kind of did ours differently because, one, we did it at 7 a.m. There's no 7 a.m. real estate investing meetups. They're all in the evenings. And so we did a 7 a.m. meetup, and then we focused it on commercial real estate specifically. And so even that's a little broad. We might begin to narrow that down. But, if you're interested in commercial real estate investing, there's really nothing like that in San Diego either. And so that's kind of our two niches. So we do that type of content from 7:30 to 8. We have about a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. And then we spend the last 15 to 20 minutes for our community that is there to speak up, to see if there's anything that anybody needs or wants, is looking for. And that is cool because it really does kind of create this community piece of like, hey, we're in this together. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I have to offer. And I have found that to be really powerful, that people really, they always leave like, man, this community is awesome. Like, I love being here. Thanks for putting this on. And it really didn't take that much work, but because people feel part of the community, that they own it, it really creates a powerful environment.
Yeah, and speaking of niches, you definitely have developed a niche for yourself as a Christian real estate entrepreneur. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that, and why is that distinction, being a Christian real estate entrepreneur, important to you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about that. It's just my story. Like I was a Christian pastor for a long time, and I got into real estate investing really on the side. I never, I really thought I was going to be a pastor in the nonprofit world my whole life. That was always my goal and passion. And we got into real estate kind of as a way to be able to supplement and provide for the things that we were passionate about, and realize like, no, we actually want to be on the other side where we're the ones creating capital and generating wealth to really support these other things. Because, I struggled. We were raising money for 6 years, and it continued to get harder and harder and harder. And I just wish that I knew and had, more folks who had a real passion and gift for making money.
You were raising money for your ministry, is that?
Raising money for our ministry, excuse me. Yeah, we were raising money for our ministry for a long time. And, most of that money we were raising came from entrepreneurs. It came from business owners. And so I had a concept of like, I always thought I was going to be on the ministry side. And we don't have time to get into this today, but it's probably because I didn't ever believe that I was a good steward of money. So when that mindset kind of shifted for me, that no, I could be a good steward of not just my time, but also my capital, it really opened the door for me to really begin to invest and build wealth. So my niche is really just my story, Brian, and I'm really passionate about building a community of like-minded people who also are really serious about building wealth, creating capital for influence, and that their Christian faith is at the center of that. And you could call it a niche. I do think there's always something important about niching down. And so for me, that niche is Christian real estate investors, guys who are really serious about this. And so we have a mastermind, essentially a community that we're building to really bring those type of folks together, so that, we're not alone in this. We can really do deals together. We can share capital. It's been really powerful.
It seems to me there's always been this friction with people of faith, that the idea of making money, and you kind of alluded to this when your mindset was that you weren't a good steward of money, but then you shifted that mindset. But there's always been this friction between the idea of, if you're going to be a person of faith, money has evil connotations, and people who are geared toward making money or even raising money, there must be something wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But you've been able to successfully shift that into actually raising money and investing in real estate. But I'm curious what your take is on that friction and that mindset. If you see that as being common, or if I'm just overstating it.
No, you're not overstating it. It's so true. How much time do we have, right? You want to do a part 2? Yeah, I have a podcast called Kingdom Capitalists, and I would definitely, if this is something of interest, not trying to pitch here, I'm just saying this is a bigger conversation. And it's why I think I've devoted this next season of my life to really educating Christians, and even just, I would say, educating, more so just telling the stories of those who have wrestled with that tension and have come out on the other side to say, no, the kingdom of God, what we really believe is coming here on earth, it is supported by capital. And I'm not ashamed to go and create that capital in order to have influence on this world. And so, I guess, Brian, the longer I'm in this, I'm not going to, in this conversation, I'm not trying to win this conversation. I'm really trying to influence about 10% of people who get it, who realize like capital is not evil. It's a good thing, and everybody needs it. And those 10% of people I want to help, and I want to help them become incredibly wealthy so that we can do incredible stuff. The other 90% will continue to argue if this is a good thing or bad thing, but still ask for our money, right? So it's like, that's kind of what my passion is in this next season, is take, the 10%, and while everybody's still talking about it, we're just going to go do it. And that's where we're going.
And how does that, being an investor who's a Christian, how does that translate to actual real practices? Because you're owning and managing rental property where sometimes people need to be evicted. They might be in dire situation, but they're not paying their rent, so you have to evict them. So how do you apply the Christian principles to those types of situations?
I mean, that's an amazing question. I would say in some ways fully, I don't know all the answers to that. Like, that's the point of actually this mastermind, this community, is those are the things we're talking about. Is not, and it even goes way beyond that. Like, actually, I love your question because it's very granular. Like, how do we treat the people in our apartment complexes, our houses, our rentals? Like, that is very specific because we are called to be good stewards of that. But then there's the bigger question of like, what about the money we're making and the wealth we're creating? And what do we do with that? And even our business model. What about if we have employees, right? And so there are multiple levels to this. And I would say like, it really does come to like, that's the point of the community, because I think on your own, it can be kind of hard to figure out, well, I have a tenant, but I have an investment property too. And I need to be a good steward of my wealth, but I'm also taking care of this person and their family. You know what I mean? So like, it's not black and white. I mean, I actually just evicted my first tenant this past month, and it felt like we were really gracious in that we gave him an extra month on top of what we had to give him, according to the law. And we just provided a lot of services to help him make that transition. We were, really gracious up through that process. And so just trying to go the extra mile.
That's a great specific example. Do you have any other specific examples of where your Christian faith has led you to make a business decision that might be counterintuitive to what, any other type of business owner might make?
Yeah, so that was a great one. That's a great. I mean, even within our mastermind, we have a donor advised fund, and so the first profits that we get go to this donor advised fund to be able to. We're actually within our mastermind. We figure out what do we want to do with these funds, and so we give 10% of kind of our first profits to that, and really figuring out what are the passions, the desires of those who are in our mastermind. The investment they make, we then donate that to probably a couple of different ministries. We actually have an event in April that we're going to get to talk about that. So that'll be really cool. So that's one. There's people on my podcast show that, like, there's one guy who's in a multifamily. He owns a company called LifeBridge Capital. He gives away 50% of his profits within his syndication business to fund adoptions. I think that's incredibly powerful.
Is that Whitney Sewell?
That is Whitney Sewell. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So he's a friend, and has been on our podcast show. So there, I'm trying to think about other guys in our group and what they have done. One guy, even think about this. This is not necessarily like a business decision, but inside of his company, he's discipling and mentoring young men in his business. He brings them in, he teaches them how to invest in apartment complexes. He spends time with them. And so there's a generosity component to say, hey, this is not just about wealth building, but this is giving me an opportunity to really disciple and teach young men. He actually had the opportunity to baptize one of those young men just a couple of weeks ago. So I just, there's things like that. There's components of like that inside of our business that, people don't think about the value of having a business and owning a business is that you have influence over people's lives. And so to be a good steward of that as well, I think is really powerful.
Ellis, if someone wanted to get a hold of you or contact you or connect with you through LinkedIn or any other way, how would they do so?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, shoot me connect with me and shoot me a message. Let me know that you heard me on this show. Would love to, set up a call if any of this is of interest, to have a more follow-up conversation. If you are an active investor and faith is important to you and you're looking for a community, kingdomcapitalists.co, capitalists with an S at the end.co, apply to be part of our next cohort. We open those up about, we're about to close on this next cohort, but we'll probably open it up again later this year. And so we'd love to see if it's a good fit. And then ellishammond.com is really kind of my platform to educate my investors. And so if anybody's interested in that as well, they can go to ellishammond.com.
All right. Well, Ellis, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing how you got started buying your duplex in San Diego and then branching out to become a syndicator and money raiser for larger apartment complexes. Your advice on using LinkedIn, that's great advice. I'm going to follow up on that, as well as Meetup Groups, and then just what it means to you to be a Christian real estate entrepreneur. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.